Welcome back to the Nassau Hockey Podcast. If we sound a little bit different tonight, James is back in his room with all of the correct equipment and the setup. I'm under the weather, and I have a new microphone that I'm testing, and it's a little quirky compared to the other one. So we'll see how this goes. So for the listeners, I hope it sounds good. We won't try to touch it up too much in post. We'll see how it sounds. James, how's it going, buddy?
I was talking to you for 30 minutes before this started, and I had no idea that you were sick or a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, so I slept with the windows open last week, and it dropped to like the mid 40s because that's what September is like here,
Oh my
where
God.
it's like 70 and 80 degrees during the day, and then it is in the high 40s and 50s and 60s
Is it
overnight.
really that cold?
It was in the 60s today. I don't think it broke 70 today, and that's it. Like the second weekend in October, that is over. It is just cold, rainy. That first whatever weekend, the first 10 days, it's a cold, rainy weekend. One of those, and then that's it.
Wow. I didn't realize it
You're
got that
fully
cold
into it.
that fast.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a cold spell. It's been raining a bunch. It hasn't been super great weather. So I've been cooped up inside a little bit. Um, and then I got a little bit of a cold here. So I'll try to mute myself when I cough because it's been happening. I do have a glass of water here to help do that. But go ahead.
It was 86 here today. That's all I was going to say.
God damn it. I hate you so much. Some news to get to first. There were a trio of defensemen that retired
Oh,
on
yeah.
Tuesday. I want to say in the morning, but I saw it in the afternoon. So the three are PK Subban, Keith Yandel, and Zdeno Chara. The latter of which matter to Islanders fans.
Sure.
And he retired to 24 seasons. I think he'll be remembered for the time in between his Islanders stints. Um, and some Islander fans pointed that out specifically, and I didn't really know how I felt about it. And so I wanted to make sure that we touched on it here. Some mixed emotions. Um, was it worth bringing him back? Like, and that's probably a loaded question because I
Oh, yeah.
think. Well, go ahead. I'll let you kind of take care of it, and then I have some thoughts now that I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah. So when you posed this question to me at first, I had to like really think about it because you're right. It's a loaded question, but it, the way I see it, look, did it work out on the ice? Clearly, no, it didn't. But was it ideal to lose the year they could have been back in the playoffs? Third year in a row. Of course, it wasn't. The things that happened, on the ice as a result. Of course, that's not what you wanted to happen. However, and whether you believe this or not, Zdeno Chara brought a tremendous amount of value to the young players on the Islanders. Like he taught guys like Mathew Barzal, who was, gushing about his work ethic on 32 Thoughts this weekend, in his 10-minute segment with Elliot and Jeff. Um, we already know he was a clear mentor to Noah Dobson, who blossomed this year. And if you saw, the comments from Robin Salo and Grant Hutton earlier today after morning skate, they just spoke so highly of him and what they learned from him in just, a single year. So was it a complete mistake? No, I wouldn't go there because his 1 year with the Islanders could have major positive implications and impact on the youth moving forward. Even today after he retired as a Bruin, like you don't get to 45 years old still playing in the NHL without taking care of yourself and having a regiment and just doing something right? And Barzell in his interview with Jeff and Elliot was talking about, I got to the gym and he was there and I was done and ready to leave and he was still there. Like he just was a workhorse. He's a a beast. He's an animal. Like he's just a different breed of human. And you saw that with, the kind of shape he was in again at 45. You can't replace that kind of value. Again, was it ideal to miss the playoffs? No. Was it
Was he the
ideal?
reason though? I think that's the question that I have.
Well, there's
Like
that too.
with or without Chara, the Islanders I think are in that spot, which I think is a little bit of the worry going into this season, right? Like,
Right.
will Romanov improve? We'll get to whomever might get that sixth spot too. There's definitely a question there, but I'm not. I think that's the worry going into this season, but I'm not sure if that was it. Like, there were so many
Well,
circumstances.
you're right.
It's
And
going to be
and
so
that's
hard to compare both of these seasons, and we needn't go over all the little things that that went wrong last year. Chara, frankly, is low on that list. Was it a good signing? I think we could confidently say no. He was exposed. He was exposed.
right.
I think he was overused as well. I think that's kind of part of the problem when you have two um,
Which is not
39,
his fault.
45. No, but when you have two defensemen that are 39 and 44, 45 years old, you can't, you're really down to four defensemen. And when you actually trust them more than your youngsters, that creates even more of a problem.
Right.
So they weren't even used correctly or being able to get set up for success. That's kind of how and so I ultimately don't think, I'm not saying it was or wasn't their fault, but I don't know they, including Andy Green in that. I don't think Chara was the linchpin on any of that, whether or not they were going to make the
No.
playoffs.
No, there was a
You can
list
point
of
to anything.
reasons. There was a list of reasons why the Islanders didn't make the playoffs last season. Chara is on that list. He's one
I think
of
he,
the
I think
reasons.
he's low on that list. Is my point.
Right.
Like,
You're
I,
correct.
so that's where I think that plays into it a little bit more.
Right. It's just
Additionally,
I feel just the it's just one of those easy things to say, "Oh, we didn't make the playoffs last year because we had Zdeno Chara on the blue line." That's a lot of how, people, I guess, cope with the fact that this is what happened and these were the facts. It's not a fact that the Islanders didn't make the playoffs because of Chara, but he was part of the problem. Um, like you said, low on that list, but definitely part of the problem. And not that he wasn't a great player his whole career. It was just, last year was it for him. Like he doesn't have anything left. Obviously, clearly he retired. So,
yeah.
um, but I don't want to leave. I don't want to stop there on that point. I don't want to end on that point. I think that the point for me here is, although it wasn't ideal to not be in the playoffs and the way it worked out on the ice wasn't ideal. Everything else, the impact he had on and off the ice for everyone else, I don't think you can replace that.
Yeah, he left his mark on this team. I think that's very clear to say. I think that's very fair to say, and we might not know the fruit of that until this season or the season after,
Right.
depending on how Dobson continues to develop, or Robin Salo, or really anybody. I'm
Yeah.
sure Chara, like a lot of Islander alumni that happen, some of them are defensemen. There's Seidenberg's around, Martinic is still around. Um, Boychuk has been around the team and is now back in official capacity with the club. So, I imagine he won't be far. It's not like he wasn't teammates with some of these people. So I think the players on the Islanders. So it's not like he's not a text away. Um, yeah, 45 years old. Who could blame him? He got tired, um, gave it a shot in Washington after a really long stint in Boston. Um, Gave it a shot with the Islanders, one last kick, and he may have just really wanted to play, and this seemed like a good opportunity. I don't want to say he didn't want to win, but maybe that mattered a little bit less to him.
Yeah.
He thought this is a good organization. If we win, that's great. I just want to be around this team. I think I can help. I think I can be an asset in some way.
Right.
And he was, and I think even already the post that I was seeing, and even myself, we're nostalgic about Chara's time with the Islanders, not even in the 90s, right? If I hadn't been a conscious fan of this team and Chara wasn't in the NHL.
Right. Right.
That's a heavy thing. Like I think there's a lot of people our age that can't remember a time in the NHL. It's almost like when Yager retired. Like we don't know a time without him. Chara is really the last of those. Maybe Joe Thornton, um, if he comes back. It seems
Yep.
unlikely. I haven't heard anything. So Chara was
Skating in San
really
Jose.
skating. He was in like someone's gym, like a friend's gym. I saw a video. It was really funny.
Yeah.
He's working out with a bunch of just like regular people. Um,
Regular Joes.
just all I know is just like men and women. They were just doing like very regular workouts, and I was like, good for him. He's just kind of like getting out there and doing his
Yeah.
thing, unapologetically. I like that. No kind of shame or whatever. Just kind of going out there and doing it. Um, but it's weird to think about not having him in the league. Whether or not he was with the Islanders in that last season is different, but I think it hits home a little bit harder. So we're all very nostalgic, and I think that masks maybe some of the things that you were discussing about him not necessarily being a mistake, but was it problematic that he was the one of the defensemen that were signed on the Islanders list? Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's um, no matter how you want to spin it. But I nostalgically, right now in this moment, the season's over. It's behind us. We're getting, rookie camp is finishing up, or development camp, or whatever you want to call it. We can all move on from that and say, man, it was kind of great to have him, wasn't it? Like, wasn't that last game? Wasn't it fun to like have him
Yeah.
around? And
Yeah.
it's easy for us to kind of separate. But I think for even, and I don't like this because we've discussed before. Like, I really don't care how long you've been a fan or how old you are or whatever. But for the fans that like us, that just we wear the fisherman stuff. I'm wearing a fisherman hat now. You can't really see it. I did for the video viewers. I dipped my head down so you could see it. Just got it off the eBay. Very good deal. But we wear this stuff partly because of him. He was huge. Like I got literally and figuratively. I have somewhere in my mom's attic. I'm hell bent on finding it. The Islanders used to have these magazines that they'd put out, and they had previous to when he got drafted, he was the centerfold, and it was like this big fold out thing, like poster.
Yeah. I remember you telling me about this.
And it folded. They were trying to make a point that he was so tall, and they had a
So
big.
tall, right?
They had a big like measuring thing, like measuring how tall he was. They were making like the biggest deal out of. I cannot find it on the internet. Like this doesn't exist. I'm like I feel like I'm in a fever dream. Like I was like I swear there was this thing.
Right.
But like they had a little fold out on the top just to like make the extra point that he was so tall. So it was like this regular 8.5 by 11, but they had this little fold out at the very top to just show like, and it was like the rest of his head or something. It was like that's just where it was, and it just folded out. It was very cool. But it's like we all became fans when he was. I think it's like Brian Berard and Eric
Right.
Fichaud and all these kind of Brian McCabe. All these type of players when we were growing up, like that was it. Ziggy Palffy. So I think it's going to be a little hard to move on. I don't think it's just going to be that easy. I mean, I have a plaque. Like he was a big enough Islander where they made little like baseball card holders for him. Like I have one, and I had him sign it. Like, and my mom used to go when Charles Wong owned the team. I don't know if I told the story on the podcast. When Charles Wong owned the team, he was the owner of Computer Associates. They would bring a handful of players into Computer Associates, and they would sign stuff. So I couldn't go. I had to go to school. So my mom would tell me the night before, here are the players that are coming. So I would go through all of my hockey cards, and I would pull out all of my hockey cards, and I would give all flags, anything I had that had Islanders on it, and I would give them to her, and she would go get them signed for me.
Wow.
And so I have like for 3 or 4 years worth from like 99, maybe 2000 to 2003, 4. I have like like Chris Osgood's signatures on like Red Wings cards, just because that's all there were no Islander cards of him. So I would just give my give my mom all the stuff, and she would go get them signed. I had this like big. I guess it went on for a pretty long time because I have like Alexa Yashin, an enormous Alexa Yashin poster, and a Michael Pekka poster signed. Like she must have looked like an absolute lunatic. Like what she did for me was just ridiculous because she would just I imagine just come with like literally a box of stuff and be like, "You're gonna be here in a minute. Like you got to sign all
Yeah.
this stuff." Um, but Chara was one of those, probably in one of the first years, honestly, just
Wow.
because he wasn't with the team much longer after 2000. So it's a little.
That's true.
And I just missed Siggy Palffy too. That was upsetting, or maybe he just didn't.
Oh,
He just didn't go. Um, but yeah, like when I think back to all that stuff, Char was around. So it's saying this all out loud. I didn't really think about it all day, but saying it all out loud. Yeah, it's pretty hard. I'm happy for him.
yeah.
He's like a real estate agent. Like he's set. Like I'm not worried about him, but that must be hard. It's
Chara's
all
a
about.
real estate agent.
Yeah, I think he has like his real estate license. Like
I know.
he's one of
Brandon
those people.
Dubinsky's doing that right now. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
I think players really kind of go out and do, not everybody is like more of a modern uh, player off the ice, like a Keith Kincaid, where they're doing some like NFTs and, more modern, just kind of like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Some players are just going to get other degrees or other things to kind of do thinking about after their career. I'm pretty sure he has his real estate license, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
Um,
really cool. Did not
but
know that.
good for him. Another former Islander defenseman news, as we mentioned, Johnny Boychuk in a player development role
Yep.
uh, with the team. Do you like this hire, and what do you think it means to the team to have him there in an official capacity? Because he was obviously around the team in one way or another, but what does it mean
Yeah.
to this team to really just have him there officially?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I really like this hire. There's something to be said about a guy who's drafted to the NHL. Takes him years to make his debut. I think it was like somewhere between 4 and 6 years. I don't remember exactly how many years. But eventually he gets there, blossoms into a top four defenseman, is an important piece to the Boston Bruins when they win the Stanley Cup. So he won a cup. And it's just, his personality. Like he was a well liked guy. He's the kind of guy when, he speaks, others just want to listen. Um, and that's just it's hard. You can't teach that, and it's a special way for him to connect with his players and everything. And I just think that there was so much on his path to the NHL that is valuable for him to teach guys like Alexander Romanov, who's going through some growing pains. Right, we don't know him as an Islander yet, but sifting through the comments and the articles and such on his career so far, right? We know he's a defensive defenseman, but he's got some things to work on. And who better than Johnny Boychuk, a guy who, had to work really hard to become an NHL player, and make his own path. And after he got drafted, it took him 6 years to get there. He had to work really hard to get there. Who better to learn than a guy like that who went through that tough road, right?
That's a
Um,
really good point about Romanov because I think Romanov has a little bit more, and nothing against Boychuk. I think they're
no,
slightly
I
different
was going to
players
say
in this
this too.
respect. Yeah, I think Romanov has a little bit more upside
I do.
um,
I think
and
that
skating ability, and Boychuk is
right,
much more of an old school like bull in a china shop type
right,
defensive
and
with a
that's
big
it.
shot, and that's not Romanov. You know what I mean? But he looks like a little bit like a better skater
Well, that's the
than
thing, right?
Boychuk.
I think they have similar play styles, but Romanov just has the modern skating ability where he's faster. He's a better skater, and his shot has been spoken about as being underrated. He's got a pretty heavy shot, but he's a defenseman who utilizes the body to create space, take the puck off of his opponent. All things that Johnny Boychuk did. So if Johnny Boychuk can show him, this is what I did to solidify myself in the top four of a Boston Bruins team that won a Stanley Cup. If Alexander Romanov has the tools to become a better player than Boychuk, and he just needs the knowledge, that's a perfect pairing right there. And I know that, that the title for him wasn't specified, for Boychuk wasn't specified, right? Player development. Is that going to be prospects? Is it going to be NHL players? I'm not 100% sure yet. Regardless, training camp starts on Wednesday and he'll be there, or Thursday. He'll be there.
Wednesday, like this
So
week, Wednesday? How do I
this
not
week,
know
yeah.
that?
Yeah, this week.
Well,
So
I've been really sick, so I've not been paying attention, I guess.
yeah,
Sicker than
so
I
it,
thought anyway.
it starts this week. He's going to be there, and so will guys like Romanov. So will guys like Robin Salo. You know,
That's right.
again, we don't know what he's going to be like as a coach, but he's not a head coach. He's not an associate coach. He's a development coach. He's one of those guys who can say, "Here's what I did. I've been there. I've done that. Take these steps and you'll have success." And again, it has a lot to do with his personality. He's one of those guys that when he speaks, others want to listen, and it's just because he's so well liked. He's so personable, and he knows how to get. That's why he wore a letter on his chest. He wasn't the captain, but he was still a leader. And again, there's the cliches. I get it, but he just is one of those guys. Whenever another player speaks of Johnny Boychuk, they glow about him, and he's just so well liked.
I really do like the comparison, or the the idea that he's gonna be there with Romanov.
The parallel.
Yeah, I like that parallel between the two of them, and then the influence. If Chara can have an influence on someone like Dobson, um, and they're very different players. Imagine if it was somebody that was a little bit more like Dobson. Not to say that
Right.
not again, you're not knocking Chara, but if Boychuk can have an influence even a little bit on Romanov, who for all intents and purposes seems to have the skill set. It just needs to be honed in. And he's still 22 years old. It's much like Dobson, who I'm sure can continue to develop and grow. And is he Kale McCarr level? I don't think so. Could be, but he's still so young. There's so much more room for him to grow. He can be his own version of whatever that is. And if the Islanders win the Stanley Cup, during his time on Long Island, Romanov or Dobson, they'll play a significant role. It doesn't really matter
Oh
if
yeah.
if it's because they scored 85 points, um, and led defensemen in scoring on the way to the cup, or they were just really good at being a defenseman.
Yeah.
Um, so if Chara can continue to have an influence on the team one way or another, Boychuk can continue to do this. They really are kind of surrounding themselves with these players that can, the core of this team, as we said, is much younger than the periphery in so much as, a Palmieri and a Peugeot and so on and so forth. So if they are going to kind of use that, the Barzals, the Sorokins, the Romanovs, the Dobsons, and so on, and Bavillier for, all intents and purposes at this moment, that's really the kind of core moving forward. If you can surround that team with some veterans who have won, um,
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Which is why, he doesn't have an official title, but Seidenberg's around. I really like that because again, he was another player, with the Bruins, whatever, it doesn't matter. He, eventually came to the Islanders and again, been there, done that, has won, has been successful. And, you know, somebody had said to me, like, oh, well, if you're basing this solely on the fact that he was a good player, like Wayne Gretzky couldn't hack it as a coach, and it's just not. I don't think it's the same.
That's
It's one of
being able
those
to
things.
teach. That's a
Right.
tough thing to translate when you're the greatest mind in hockey, to tell people, "Oh, just be there." Like, why
Right.
why do you not
Right.
understand? Like,
And
"Oh, you
that's the
just
thing,
do
right?
this."
I feel like when you're like you said, the greatest mind in hockey, you don't go through the adversities. And I think that there's a lot to learn by going through the adversities, and then when you're, in the position of Johnny Boychuk, having gone through them, you can now relay those messages. You can relay those adversities you've been through, and I guess kind of try to guide players away from having to go through those adversities and just breaking right through. and coming out on the other side. Nassau Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. The NFL action is in full swing here at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with the DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100%. With payouts bigger than ever, why bet on a football game anywhere else? And to make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped up same game parlays once per game day all season long. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN to get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Nassau Hockey is also brought to you by Raycon. Lately, John and I have been listening to a lot of hockey podcasts, and it's been great. One reason it's been so great to listen to? Well, because we use Raycon wireless earbuds to do it. Raycon's everyday earbuds look, feel, and sound better than ever. With optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit, these earbuds are so comfortable and they will not budge, trust me. Raycons give you 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. Raycons are priced just right. You get quality audio at half the price of other premium audio brands. It's no wonder Raycon's everyday earbuds have over 50,000 5-star reviews. The Raycon wireless earbuds John and I both use offer 3 customizable sound profiles, earbud tap functions, noise isolation, and my personal favorite feature, the awareness mode that lets you hear outside of the earbuds when they're in your ears while listening to songs, podcasts, video games, whatever you're using your Raycon wireless earbuds for. Not only have I been using my Raycon wireless earbuds to listen to podcasts, but I've also been using them to listen to music, play video games, watch TV shows, pretty much anything audio related that I need. So go to buyraycon.com today and use code THPN15 to get 15% off your Raycon order. That's code THPN15 at buyraycon.com to score 15% off. Buyraycon.com, code THPN15.
I want to move on to the Barzal interview on 32 Thoughts because I think this got people really excited one way or another.
Yeah.
Some questions, some we've heard this before. Do you think we have? Is this different? Is what we're hearing out of him different?
Did you hear the interview? Like you listened to the whole thing?
I did actually I made a point to listen to the entire thing today.
I mean, look, I get it. Like players just use these cliches, but he really gushed about loving it in New York, loving it on Long Island. Like some people refer to, like you said, I've heard this before. No, you really haven't. Like he talks so highly about being from, he considers himself a New Yorker now. You heard that tidbit? I would say he goes 51-49% New Yorker, probably 60-40 maybe. Like he's ingrained in New York. He's ingrained in Long Island, and he said it's an underrated place to live. I love my life here. Like you didn't hear that before, right? There is so much passion behind his words. What you heard before years ago when we were all left heartbroken was business. This was not business. This was, I love it here. And there's a difference. I get it. You can be hesitant to believe it. I understand. And there's still business to be done. And again, per Elliot Friedman, those talks have started. But the fact of the matter is that you have not heard this before. He glows about being a New Yorker or an import, from Canada, now a New Yorker, loving Long Island. It's not what you've heard before.
I think that's right. And I don't want to play devil's advocate or find a way to not play that up more, because I did hear all of that. He even kind of slipped up right before Friedman said So you heard it here first. Barzal extension coming, or something to that effect. It was because Barzal had said, "Yeah, in 2 or 3 years, all my buddies are going to have to come out from BC to New York." So Friedman, I think, playing around, half joking at least, was like, "Oh, that does that mean you heard it here first? Like an extension?" Um, and I think his personality definitely came out a little bit more. We don't often get to see that from Barzal.
Right.
That's something that Tavares didn't have, was a personality, at least not with the public at all, which is curious, as a leader of a team. Um, but Barzal definitely let that out a little bit, and you could tell, and he nearly said as much. He would be more interested in being more of face. It's just more of a Lamoriello thing and a team thing, and Friedman made mention of that as well. And I'll say this about Lamoriello: the way that he does business is working against him in this case, because Barzal is controlling the PR. This is an opportunity, because he doesn't get media opportunities often,
Right.
right? So this was somewhat of an uncontrolled space. This is Barzal being Barzal. He's a member of the Islanders, but he's there almost on his own behalf in some respect, and he gets to control the PR to pretty much say, "I want to be there. If this doesn't work out, it is not my fault." And I think a lot of players do that. Hey, I said the whole way up, this didn't work out. It's not on me. And this is where
Right.
Lamoriello's, the way that he does business, could hurt him in this case.
Did
I
you
know.
did you hear the other day? It might have been yesterday or 2 days ago. As you're hearing this, um, Lamorello's comments on Barzell, because he was asked if extension talks have started, and it was one of those things where he kind of beat around the bush or whatever, and said, he ended it with, "I'm Matthew Barzell's biggest fan. I of course I want him here." That's I don't want to say it's a stupid question, but that's a stupid question.
Yeah, it's slightly off brand for him to be that straightforward, but it
Yeah,
doesn't help that it wasn't. I don't know what I really expected him to say, because I did, now that you're saying, I
correct.
do remember that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts, and this is why it's so weird. Like, I'll never understand him. It's actually annoying, frankly. There's no reason why you couldn't be like, yeah, of course, we're talking about, like, that hurts something.
Right,
That does. It's not like other GMs haven't said, yeah, we're actively making this work here. We're
right.
we're we're figuring that out. Um,
It just
but
happened. It just happened with Nathan McKinnon, who signed to be the most or highest paid player. Right. It was same setting, 32 Thoughts. It was Nathan McKinnon's interview, and they said, "So something is something up," and he was like, "Yeah, yeah, it's happening."
yeah, I mean, you're crossing your T's and you're dotting your lowercase J's. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that's a Wayne's World reference for those who don't know. Go watch that. Go watch
Already
that
on.
movie. Party on. Um, I wish that was our sign off. That would have been great. I wish we had just kind of
we could we could
organically
start.
did that.
We
Nah,
could start it
you already
today.
have a shtick. Like,
Till
we're in
next
it.
time, party on.
I don't
It
know.
works.
I like our. It does, but I like our thing. Like, we're in it now. We just do it. But I think that's a little bit of the problem. And again, Barzell goes at length to say, and he takes the time to say, "I want to be here. This is great. I love my life." And Lamorel's like, "That's a dumb question," more or less. I'm Barzell's
Yeah.
biggest fan. What's crazy is that, like, that's a lot for Lamoriello, but it's still not very much for us to go on. I think the subtext is, yes, obviously they're having that conversation. He's an RFA. It's a little bit different of a situation. I read into Barzell's in 2 or 3 years a little too much, I think. That, like, I paused it for a second. I was like, another bridge, like, there's no way. There's no way he's signing for 2 or 3
No,
years
no.
at that point. Um, and then becoming a a UFA at 27, 20, 28 years old. He's for sure gonna make sure he gets his paycheck, and
Although
he's gonna get
I'll say
7 or 8 years regardless.
I'll say this. Listening to who was I listening to? Friedman. No, sorry, redact. I was listening to Saravalli and Gregor, and they were talking about how the NHL should adopt a 5-year maximum contract for players, just because of the ever growing salary cap, which not next year, but the year after is projected to jump to like 91 million. And, you know, keeping that in consideration and in mind, does a player like Barzell maybe go a little shorter term, work out another contract when the salary cap is higher, make a higher AAV? Not saying that that's what he's thinking right now, but maybe maybe in the future, once that salary cap finally does make that jump, maybe things change in the uh, contract negotiations in league wide, because players, look at Sidney Crosby right now. Sidney Crosby is like the 15th highest player paid in the NHL.
Yeah, it's all
15th.
about percentage of the cap at the time. Like
Yeah.
the a deal with Barzell will look like it hurts up front, but over time it should get that was the problem with the salary cap um, stagnating and kind of staying
Yeah.
where it was. A lot of these GMs that signed extensions in the summer of 2019 or signed players in 2019 or extensions during the season, it hurt them a lot when the cap just like didn't go up and they were like, oh, it'll be
Right.
like whatever 95 million in a few years. That
Right.
yeah, there'd be such a small percentage of the cap. Um, in the first couple of years, it might hurt, but it'll be okay. Um, yeah, that it's a possibility. I really don't want to talk too much about that just because we'll. I mean, I guess it's still the summer. We don't have a whole lot to discuss, but I don't want to get down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Certainly
No.
not during the season. But it was
Got a few
interesting
more
that
points here.
I think I really liked his personality coming out a little bit, though. It was
Oh,
just
for sure.
seeing an Islander, I think, just kind of being themselves, and I wish they had done one with Anders Lee as well because I think he seems like a really kind of fun guy as well. Um, but it was cool to see Barzell and really like talking up Long Island and all of that. I think the tough part is it seems like he really does want to get involved a little bit more with PR and getting out there and doing his own deals and doing all this kind of stuff that a lot of other players are doing with brands and whatever. Um, it would be cool to have a player like that kind of represent the team and the island and the franchise and all of that
Yeah.
in a unique way that we haven't seen. Where like years ago they didn't use Ziggy Palffy in that respect, and he was far and away the best Islander and one of the best scorers of that generation that doesn't get talked about enough, criminally underrated during
Yeah.
during that time. Um, so it would be cool for Barzell to be kind of leveraged in that way
Yeah.
a little
And
bit more
and
uniquely.
I love how Marek ended that whole segment off too with they're sitting on a gold mine with Mathew Barzal. And I think those are truer words haven't been spoken at this point.
About Lamoriello, there were some pretty quick comments about two hopefuls for the roster coming into this year in Dufour and Ratu. Do you want to go over his quotes, maybe what it means for them?
Yeah.
They seem to be destined for Bridgeport, if I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much, the way I read it. He said, if I had a crystal ball, I'd say they're not ready for the NHL at this point. When it comes to young players, I'd rather have them come up too late rather than too soon. So
That hurts.
it,
I don't like hearing that.
I don't love it.
Especially with other teams having such success with young players that are just hungry,
Right.
and there's really no room for them. And that if that's what he had said, it would be believable. Hey, we have
Right.
a we have a
And that's the
veteran
thing.
group we have a veteran group that I believe in, and if there becomes an opportunity for them to get a shot, they'll be at the top of that list. As it stands right now, I said it a few months ago. I like this roster. I don't see a spot for them at this moment.
Right. That's different.
This I don't like. I don't like
So
this
here's the thing.
marinating forever kind of deal.
Well, now I want to backtrack that just a little bit because and play a little bit of devil's advocate. Do I love that he said he doesn't think that they're ready? No. Um, but does it surprise anybody? Lamorello traditionally makes sure his prospects season a little bit. And like he said, I'd rather them season a little too long if I have to. However, the thing is with Ratu and DeFore, look, they were phenomenal this year in their respective leagues, no doubt about it. Uh, Small taste for Ratu, but DeFore hasn't gotten any yet. They're both going into their first year as a professional in the North American game, or in Ratu's case, the North American game,
Well,
and
for the pros, North
in,
American
in both their
professionals.
cases in North American professional. Yes, it would be good for them to play the North American style at the AHL level first. Um, get a taste down there, and look, like if they quickly acclimate and they're performing well and they can help the Islanders this season at some point, yeah, absolutely call them up. I think that Lamorello needs to be open to that. I think that he needs to, get away from the rely on my vets. They've been there, done that kind of thing because the league is getting younger. But that being said, Simone Holmstrom, he's a guy I could see making the leap before those two, just because he's already got a few seasons under his belt. He took a big step last season. And I think it's one of those things where Ratu and DeFore may have higher ceilings. But I think Holmstrom may just be a little bit more prepared because, like I said, 2 years already in the AHL, won an abbreviated season, but it was just that for him, right? There was the abbreviated season, and then last year was a full one, and that's when he really took a step forward, right? You saw him make a real good leap last year, and I'm not sitting here saying he's a home run prospect. He's got to be in the top six. He'd probably be a good third liner at the NHL level, and look, if he can go to camp and battle for left wing three. Don't get me wrong. I love Zach Parise. I think that he's an excellent player, especially at this point in his career, but he is 38. So if at 750,000, if he's going to sit down and be a 13th forward, fine. Because if Simone Holmstrom can really fight for that spot and force his way into the lineup and make it hard for Lambert not to put him in, then that can only mean good things for the Islanders.
Here's a little bit of the issue with that. And it's not wrong. It's just not possible unless they waive somebody.
Well, that's
So
the thing, right?
like there's literally, I'm not saying there's no room, like there's no room in the lineup. I'm saying on their 23 player roster, after they waive Richard Panik, presumably, and he's in Bridgeport or loaned or wherever he goes, they're at 22 players.
Right.
They need a seventh defenseman. We'll talk about what the options are for that in a second. There's just no room unless somebody goes on IR, and then they have to be outplaying Kiefer Bellows or Ross Johnston. Depends on where they are. If they're on the road, they'll have Bellows and Johnston with them. It's easier to just plug them in. You don't really have a choice. But once they get back home and they have time to get a player out to wherever they're going to do, wherever they're playing, if they choose to do that, they have to have the confidence of the coaching staff at that particular time to be put in over Bellows. That's the real, or Johnson. Although that's a much easier choice for me, unless it's Martin or Clutterbuck at a certain point. Although I really don't want Martin and Johnson in the lineup at the same time, even with Zizekas down the middle. So like they just don't really have the room. I don't see how it's possible. That's kind of the issue here. And if that's what Lamorello said is, with the way that our roster is right now, we don't really have the room, and I'd like for them to go down and get a taste of that North American game. It's just the way that he says things, I think, just rubs me the wrong way. Like he's trying to be coy about it. If I had a crystal ball, I'd say they're not ready. Dude, screw off. Like, I'd rather have them come up too late than too soon. That's nonsense. That doesn't mean anything. Say that they need time playing the North American professional game. You're a general manager, for God's sakes. Be professional. I just don't understand all this beating around the bush. It serves nobody. No one's gonna badmouth you to say, I want my these are some of our top prospects. I want them developing with Brent Thompson and that coaching staff in Bridgeport, and they need time in the professional game. You know, Ratu had that experience. Dufour has not yet. Um, it's going to take some time. Um, they can earn a spot eventually if an opportunity arises. That's completely up to them.
Yeah.
That would send a message. That would send a message to them. Not I. It's nothing.
Right.
What he said is nothing. It just leaves, I think, people more aggravated that it was completely written off immediately. Like, he saw them in person for 5 days and then was like, no. Now again, it's not really possible. Like, he'd have to do some movement, and it was hard to do this summer apparently. Um, so be that as it may, I think again that the one of the questions that we have is about that sixth defensive spot,
Yeah.
presumably next to Mayfield. And it seemed to me anyway pretty clear that Salo was there. Um, Aho seemed to kind of be around as the other player in the mix. It didn't seem like he was ready for some kind of full time job. With Salo, it seemed like they can split time, but that doesn't seem as clear after this week in training camp.
No. Um, some interesting dialogue from certain people. You expect Salo, Aho, and Cholowski to maybe battle it out. And I say Cholowski loosely just because of his history, right? He's been in the NHL a little while. Um, Albeit he bounced around a little bit, and he's a first round draft pick that hasn't quite worked out yet. He hasn't stuck. And that's the issue regarding his game. He doesn't have it defensively. He has all the offensive tools, but um guys like Grant Hutton have been on the record saying they know it's there for the taking, and he's a guy that has experience on his offside. He's played the left side as a right-handed defenseman. So look, if Hutton really impresses, like you said earlier, Lambert said he's coming into camp with an open mind. It doesn't seem impossible. It's tough if I'm Lambert. It's tough because I really want Salo to show me he's the guy. If the blue line is supposed to be more mobile and more offensive, but if a guy like Salo forces his way on, you take that.
Yeah, Hutton seems like a weird choice to me, being that not even just because he's right-handed, but because he's really a replacement for Mayfield possibly after the season. Um, so I'm not exactly sure having two of the same player on a pair if Romanov
Right.
and Dobson are indeed that pairing, that second pair.
And that makes sense. And that's why it's tough. Like I said, tough for me if I'm Lambert, because you want it to be Salo. You want
Y-
that mobile guy with the offensive flair, someone who can possibly, have some power play two time, because he's not going to take power play one from Dobson. But like, you know, if you can put in a Devin Tays light back into the lineup, you want that.
Yeah, and I think having Aho there, pushing him a little bit, as a little bit more of a quote veteran presence, Salas still has to earn his time. It's not just a given that he'll get the majority of the games just because he's a younger guy. I think he's still going to have to earn those minutes, and those games for sure. And having those two there, are they both from Finland? Am I making that up, or is Aho
Salo is Swedish.
Salo is Swedish? Okay, so it's different. I figured, but even still, it's similar enough. Maybe they can kind of help each other in that way too. Aho can be a little bit of um, a mentor to Salah one way or another, just having kind of been around. And gone through his own struggles, like you were saying about Boychuk and the adversity. Um, I think it's healthy competition, but I think they can also help each other. Cholowski, I have no idea.
Right.
I don't. I think that's a good, you know, lefty version of Grant Hutton with a different skill set, like veteran guy to have around. You don't want to have to use him. Hutton, I don't think is that case. I think he played really well last season. And I do think if Mayfield doesn't come back, Hutton is a 2-year younger version of Mayfield. You just plug him in on the right side in that third pair um, after this season. You know the guy, you trust him. That's his time. He'll come in at whatever 28, 29, like Mayfield is this season. If Mayfield doesn't come back and resigns, you have Hutton. I believe he has another year after this, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I don't have it in front of me, but or maybe another couple of years now that I'm looking at it. So it's entirely possible that he is the future third pair, just not this season.
Right.
Salo makes a lot of sense. If you're not going to do it in the forward group and you have an opportunity to get a lot younger on the back end, and you do have somebody like Aho that presumably you trust, you brought him back. You didn't have like Bellows. You didn't have to do that. And if you're doing it just because you know them and then you're going to punish them and not play them, that's very confusing. It's confusing to me as a fan. It can't be great for them as players. It's
Yeah.
I don't understand the the thought process. It seems like it's a lot of business and not a lot of like tactical how does it actually get used decisions. Again, like Chara. Oh, the after effects of Chara being around the team for a year are going to pay dividends for years. In the moment, that wasn't good. Like
Right.
it clearly wasn't work. So like we can't just keep going on that assumption and that mindset forever. Eventually, you need to just kind of put young players in and surround them with the veterans that they're going to succeed, whether that's on or off the ice. So it's definitely a little confusing for me. Um, did you have other notes from that camp? I did see some stuff about Dufour
Yeah.
um, and Raju, but I think to kind of wrap up here, I was wondering what else you saw that kind of stuck out as the main group gets set to take the ice this week.
Yeah, I just think that we're learning a lot more about William Defoe, and I'm still in my mind at least Ratu's still the number one prospect in in this system, just because he's had the previous experience playing against higher level competition. But reading up about Defoe today and how he went through and say what you want about player development, but off ice factors factor in more than it. Whether you want to accept that or not, off ice factors play a huge role in how players develop. And the thing with DeFore is he was a fifth round draft pick. However, and the line that I read today, I believe was out of Kevin Kurtz's article, was it was almost like he was sitting right there in front of everybody in plain sight for anybody to take before the fifth round, and they didn't. All the tools were there, the make was there. His shot, you can't teach his shot. It's an NHL caliber shot. Um, you can't teach the size that he has. You can't teach the stature. The thing about what he went through off the ice, if you haven't read Kevin Kurz's latest article, was that he was, helping his mom battle cancer, and luckily she's okay now, and they're on the other side of it. She's still taking medication and whatnot, but off of the ice, like when he wasn't playing hockey, he was taking care of his mother, going to doctor's appointments with her, making cooking for her, housekeeping, like all those things. Those are definitely a factor. Um, and then you saw, when things started to get better for them off the ice, things got really good for William Defoe on the ice. So, um, I think a lot of his development has to just do with the off ice factors, and that things are going well for him. And it's not to say he's one of those players who has issues, with his headspace. It's not like that. He was going through something with and something that he couldn't control off the ice. So Yeah, it's looking like at one point the Islanders prospect pool not too long ago too was spoken about as being rather weak. And now, not to say that there's any A grade prospects in the pipeline that are, gonna carry this team to Stanley Cup number 5, but it's at least stronger in the sense that there are now players in the system who are at some point hopeful to be serviceable NHLers.
If I'm
Um,
not mistaken, I saw Corey Pronman's prospect ranking. The Islanders are up to 23 from
Yeah, I think
31.
I think that they have definitely jumped up a little bit, and that's because guys like DeFore had the season he had. Roth, who did the same thing, he had an excellent season as well. And they did pretty good in the last draft. I'm really high on Isaiah George, and we'll talk about him in a second because he actually did get hurt yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, John.
I did. He
But
he was helped off. I
yeah,
think
he
he
was.
crashed into the boards or
Yes. So lower body injury as of right now. There's no timetable on when he will return to the ice, but um, I'm high on a player like him who, before he made the comparison himself, I was saying to myself, if you can skate, if you're a good skater, that's half the battle in the NHL, and he's a I think in the last draft he was ranked one of the best skaters, and I forget what the test is called, but at the combine he had the highest vertical,
hmm.
and he was labeled like the most athletic guy there. So he was also the 15th ranked North American defenseman. Um, he went back to London to play for the London Knights, and he was automatically on their top pair. He compares himself to Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars and Gustav Forsling of the Florida Panthers. And I think that if you can get a player who's maybe not Miro Heiskanen or Forsling, but Heiskanen Forsling light in the fourth round, I think the Islanders got a really good player there. I think Kalo Delius is a very good player who's not at training camp, but another excellent skater who was projected to be a first round talent and fell to the second round to the Islanders, much like Ratu did. It's just, and Holmstrom took a step forward so far, and I'm interested to see how Tristan Lennox is going to develop as a goaltender. I have this sneaking suspicion that the Islanders prospect pool is a lot better than a lot, of the credit that they're not getting. Um, Samuel Baldock, like he's a player who he went through a ton of injury and COVID issues last season that, unfortunately took away from a year of his development. But the season before that, he was being spoken about as he the next guy up in the pipeline. So I think this is going to be the first real season for everyone. Last season was what it was with all the COVID issues that were happening in the beginning of the season, but it seems like we could be past all that stuff now. And everybody, presuming that they're healthy, could now finally take that step forward. And I think the Islanders, like I said, nobody's gonna wow you, and they're gonna be grade A prospects, but I think they have at least now a couple of guys who are serviceable at some point to be NHL players.
That's a great wrap up. It's kind of good to know that there are those opportunities for the Islanders down the line. Like I said before about the core of this team, it'll be kind of nice to see how that develops over time and with the kind of younger, 25 and under players on the current NHL roster, and then players
Yeah.
like um, that they kind of have. And you don't need a lot. You really just need a few, and then you can surround them with other veterans. So it's entirely possible that all this works out uh, pretty well for the team.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's all we have for this week, though.
Yeah. I think that's it. We can call it a wrap there.
Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Nasselman Hockey. You can find James's work at the Fourth Period. You can find my work at the Hockey Writers. Make sure to sign up for Isles Fix on Substack. That'll be coming back any week now with news and updates on a weekly and daily basis. And Mr. Nichols, bring us home.
Until next time, everyone. Let's go Islanders.